competition and collaboration is working really well beside each other.
Critiquing yourself is actually much more difficult than being critiqued by others.
I wanted to make my players able to perform in a very highly competitive environment. It can be Klopp, can be Mourinho, can be Guardiola, and I can tell the other coaches it's always the second year when they really win, because it takes time until they establish their culture, the environment, the players know what the coach wants.
I always realized that this is a craft, and any craft needs to be learned.
I don't think that you have to fire someone to change things. The keyword is openness. The slogan of the Hunting Territory method is predict, detect, resolve.
Every organization is now looking at how can we break down the silos. I've never seen a relationship without any type of conflict.
My philosophy is that you have to prepare the team to be self-efficient. Empowerment works only if it goes through enabling.
We need to create an environment of safety so that more people feel courageous. Hello everyone, welcome to today's Agile Insights conversation. I'm being joined by István Görgényi. He will introduce himself properly. He has so much stuff to share, and I will leave the stage to him. In today's conversation, I will focus this conversation on 4 topics. The first one is going to be getting to know István. The second one is learning about his experience being a member of a very high-performing team. The third one is how he moved from being a team member to being a team coach. So basically leading from the sidelines. And the last topic of today's conversation is going to be around how István took his lessons from the worlds of sports to the worlds of business, which I think he's been doing now for the past decades or many decades. Now, before we get started and dive into the topics right away, I wanted to take a few moments and give István the time and space to properly introduce himself so that all of you who are watching this live or later in a recording know from who you will be learning as part of this conversation. István, welcome to this conversation series. I'm very, very grateful that you're making time for us. And I'd like to give you the time and space to properly introduce yourself. It's your stage.
Thank you, Sohrab. It's really a privilege to be invited here. I saw several of your lectures or presentations, and I thoroughly enjoyed them. So originally, I was a professional polo player for a successful club team, Vasas, and the Hungarian national team 96 times. We won an Olympic silver medal and the World Championship title, apart from a lot of other things. And the important thing is that I learned how to live and perform in a very competitive environment. And a very important experience was that actually competition and collaboration is working really well beside each other. It's not true that it's against each other, whether you perform or whether you collaborate or compete. It's not true. It's going together. It's inspiring. If it doesn't kill you, you will win. And if it's well managed, it doesn't kill the team either. Then I became a coach of a Hungarian club team, and I won championship title with practical unknown players using already the Hunting Territory method, although it wasn't called Hunting Territory back that time. And then I went to France. I won again titles with the French team Castle-Nice. And then I went to Australia and coached the Australian women's water polo team to an Olympic gold medal in 2000. But in the meantime, there was a very important sideline or main line of my life that I went to work to a psychiatric clinic and learned group and family therapy. And that was the time when social psychiatry started to enter into the Eastern Bloc. And it was an absolute revelation for me, understanding human behavior as a result of the system we live in. And I loved it so much that even if I went there only to learn a bit of psychology for my university thesis, I stayed there for 12 years, and I was still working there while I started to coach, and it was extremely useful for me. So I think that will do.
Cool. Istvan, this is a lot of stuff that you've done. You briefly mentioned the hunting territory method, which is then, I think, something that you took after your career as a coach and brought it more into the world of business. And obviously, we'll talk about that as part of the fourth topic of today's conversation. Now, you mentioned something about collaborating and competing when you were talking about your own time as a player. And let's dive into that period of your life first, which now probably many years ago. But I believe, or I assume, you still have like fond memories of that time. What was it like to be a player on a very competitive and successful team? What were the dynamics in that team? What was your role in that team? How do you took, for example, a leadership role in that team, if you did? Walk us through that a bit. So, because a lot of people make analogies to the world of sport, but have never been a professional athlete themselves. You have been there, and I'd like to dive a bit into that with you.
I am thankful you asking for it. I don't know how much time we have, but it was a very rich part of my life and a beautiful part of it, even if there were competitions, sometimes really harsh, but it was a real joy. It was full of life. You competed every day, but you got better from it. And actually, that team, in my club team as well as in the national team, we grew up together as junior players, getting into the world stage as practically one of the best teams of the world. But we competed against each other in every single moment. We wanted to be better than the other one. And I think that was the reason why we were so good. It never stopped. And because we grew up together for a while, it was really like paradise. We didn't have serious conflicts. But then, as we got a bit older and young players were introduced, and a very ambitious coach who was a bit of jealous of our cohesion, really, really bad conflicts started to hit the surface, and I went through that as well. And at the end, I wasn't winning within this competition, so I got out of the national team while I was still in the starting seven, and I was a sort of a defensive leader of the team, so I had a pretty important role there. In my club team, I was the captain, club captain. But it was a very, very important thing because I saw myself as a victim. And it was that time when I finished my study at the university, I went to work to that psychiatric clinic. And with this systemic approach, all of a sudden I understood my own role in those conflicts, and also how the coach should have managed those conflicts, and we could have won 2 more Olympic gold medals, actually, because the team was so strong. But even if it was extremely painful because I was fully engaged in my role as a player, I didn't play for money. Actually, we didn't make that much money like stars make nowadays, but we didn't pay for that. And actually, that's another thing. It helped me all the way, because I knew that people are motivated by being engaged and appreciated more than by paid a lot of money. And I used that experience as a coach as well as a consultant in the business environment as well. So I am not sure whether I answered your questions or not.
Yeah, no, you already did to some extent, and you gave us
Please ask.
Yeah, I will ask. I have follow-up questions here, because while you speak, I'll make notes for myself, and then I'll ask follow-up questions. So you mentioned that you competed every day, you got better from it. And I want to understand now, from your perspective as a player, how did your coach, not the one that you mentioned later, who was jealous about the cohesion of that, like your previous coach, how did that coach create the environment so that you and other players, while competing with each other, because there are only 7 spots on the starting 7, right, still managed to be a very strong team that ultimately won a ton of things, right? A silver medal in the Olympics, World Championship, and probably could have won more. What did the coach did back then, from your perspective as a player, that resulted in this special, let's call it, culture?
If you broaden the picture, the Hungarian water polo had and has a very deep tradition of winning gold medals. I think we already won 9 gold medals in the Olympic history. And the other thing, that we practically lived in one swimming pool. There were no tons of swimming pools in Budapest. So we shared the swimming pools, probably 7 clubs in Budapest. And most of the national team players played in those clubs. So we saw each other every day. And the culture was this competitiveness. So it didn't depend only on that coach. The coach just was part of that culture. And I had actually several coaches, and they were all Olympic champions. So they created that environment that you knew that you had a chance to make the team. It is not in concrete that who would play in the national team and who wouldn't. So you always competed for your position in the team, even making the team. Mm-hmm. But the coach, and also the trainings, I was a swimmer, and I was born by the swimming between 2 ends of the pool. And after I went to play water polo, which was always vibrant with a lot of different drills. As I said, anything we did, we competed with each other. If you talk about shooting accuracy, speed, changing direction, warm-up, even in warm-up we were competing. So that was the atmosphere and the culture, and the coaches built on it. So they saw the real performances of the players. So it was not much micro-politics in water polo back then.
Yeah. So as long as there was fairness from a player's perspective, you were all fine in competing and at the same time collaborating, because when you were then on the same team, and that's my understanding, like there were different clubs and people from different clubs came to the national team, but when you were on that same team, you also wanted to win, and
exactly.
that desire to win made you all collaborate, made you all work together.
And water polo is quite a tough sport, so sometimes we were hitting each other when we played against each other, but we still remained friends. But because you knew the added value of the other players. So I learned all these things without this phrases. I didn't use back then these phrases, but now I know that it was this about.
Yeah. Now, another thing I picked up while you were initially talking about your experience as a player was you saw yourself as a victim at some point. And then you were also doing your studies at the same time. When you think about that, a lot of people see themselves as a victim in a certain situation. Like my boss treated me bad, or my wife did this to me, or whatever, right? How did you manage to get out of this? I assume you got out of this. I assume you chose to look at yourself differently, but what triggered that thought process? And then how did you eventually succeed of not seeing yourself as a victim any longer?
And that was the role of the social psychiatric experience. Because, the patient in a clinic is always looks like the victim of the family system. And they actually live it like that. And the family see that they are the victims of that patient. So I learned that behavior or the signs of it and the consequences of it in the same time that I really understood what was going on. And so I saw my own story from a totally different angle. If you want, I saw it from a helicopter view, what was going on. And I understood my own role in it. And when I became a coach, I was very cautious to not to create a similar environment and try to discover the hidden talents of my players. I never had scapegoats after a lost game. I've never done that. So it was all of that, and I think that was one of the reasons of my success as a coach.
Yeah. So this is interesting, right? You mentioned you saw yourself from a helicopter perspective, and you realized your own role in things. My experience has been the moment you realize your own role in a certain situation, you immediately also realize that you're not the victim anymore, right? Doesn't mean that all the fault is with you, but you know that having played a part in that, it also gives you the power to change it.
Yes.
Because as long as you view yourself as a victim, you feel powerless. So you cannot change things. But the moment you move out of that, you're like, hey, I made it this way, so I can also make it different. Did that also happen with you when you viewed yourself from the helicopter perspective?
Yeah, but to be truthful, and I think this is all our experience, that it doesn't take away the pain. What you lost. You still feel and live the loss, but in the same time you get the power to stand up and to start something new and be better than you were.
Yeah. No, I think what you mentioned, right? It brings a bit of pain. Sometimes it brings a lot of pain.
Yes.
Because you realize that depending on how messy the situation is, that you have been contributing to this yourself.
Yes.
And critiquing yourself is actually much more difficult than being critiqued by others.
Yeah.
Because when others critique you, you can still take that victim mentality and say, he doesn't even know in what kind of a situation I am. But the moment you critique yourself, you also know it's not enough to just critique myself. I have to make a change. Now, let's use this as a segue, because you already talked about it a bit. You move into the role of a coach yourself. What are the things you decide to do different than all the coaches probably, or some of the coaches that you had in the past? What kind of culture, what kind of environment do you aspire to build so that your players, and you mentioned like discovering hidden talents and all of that, that your players can really succeed as a team?
You used a very important word in your one of your presentations about enablement. Mm-hmm. And I think this is what I've done. Again, I didn't know that word back then. But I wanted to make my players able to perform in a very highly competitive environment where they were actually underdogs. So I had to encourage them and teach them even sports-wise skills to be on the same level as the opposition or even better. And we were better as a team, even if individually they weren't better necessarily. And the other thing was that because I was so lucky to live in those great team environment where there was really a mutual appreciation, a lot of love, a lot of laughter, and the support of each other. So I made sure that I created the same environment. When I took my first club, it was a really dysfunctional team where all the players bullied the youngsters and kept their position in the hierarchy by doing that. So that was my first step to completely sweep out that culture. It wasn't easy, but they so badly wanted to win that I had they appreciated my name and me as a player. So I was able to convince them to do things. But there were still days when things went out of control. So I had to be strong to make on the same pathway. And we didn't win in the first year. And if you watch the big football games and teams, and I know you love football, it always takes 2 seasons until you won the first competition. It can be Klopp, can be Mourinho, can be Guardiola, and I can tell the other coaches, it's always the second year when they really win, because it takes time until they establish their culture, the environment, the players know what the coach wants. I don't repeat what you already present a lot of time because the system is the same. So I had to make sure that even if when we were losing or they felt that we are not on the right pathway, I kept the team on the same path. I was strong on the training sessions. And it was a very important thing because I've done the same thing in France and then in Australia, that I created a club as well. The clubs were really just sort of amateur clubs, not well organized, not too many support or sponsors. So I had to build it up as well. And at the end, it went so well that people were happy to just come to the swimming pool and being with us. So I actually organized some sponsors just because they were happy to come to the swimming pool.
This is great.
And I've done the same thing in France. Obviously, anywhere I went, I knew that there was a possibility to create this environment. So I didn't go somewhere because I had an offer. So I was always studied closely the opportunities or the situation. And I think that's another thing. If you see the history of these great coaches, they do the same thing. They don't take any team, so they know that they can succeed, and they go there. They don't go just for the money.
Yeah, they know also what kind of environment they need in order to be successful.
And they said that vision before they signed the contract.
Yeah,
and that's what I've done. The biggest achievement I've done was in Australia, where there was no national women's program, and I knew that I had to establish a solid decentralized program in order to win the Olympic Games. And I've done that. So the first year, the biggest challenge for me was actually the transition of the whole program. It's not just coaching the players. And because before I was already the national junior coach, and I traveled around the country, and I learned the great Australian elite sports system, and I had already people I knew. So that's why I took that position, because I was sure that it's possible to build it up. And when I left Australia, the position, we already won a gold medal. We were fourth in Athens after losing practically all the players. And we won junior world championships as well. And in the three centers, more than 100 girls were involved, juniors and sub-juniors, their coaches as well. So I think I am as proud of that system, which was unfortunately destroyed after I left, that we were able to build a so strong national program. So we were actually ahead of the Americans, who now win everything for 15 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned again several interesting things. The first thing I noted down was enablement. And you made a reference to some of the presentations that I've given. For me, this is such an important topic, because any profession that I have been in, and I've had already several careers, basically, starting out as a medical doctor, then management consultant, then becoming a trainer and coach for the type of work that I do right now. I always realized that this is a craft, and any craft needs to be learned. And you can learn it better if you have someone who is already some kind of a master of that craft, and they can teach you. And in many professions, medicine being one of them, this is very normal. But when I look at the world of management, that's not necessarily the case, right? It's just expected that people come out of university and that they know how to do things. And in sports, again, it's very normal that kids starting, my son has now just started soccer training, football training, he has to learn all the bits and pieces of the technique. And for him to learn, he needs someone who can do this. So in your position as a coach, I guess, and I probably am right on this one, it was very beneficial that you were such a good player yourself in the past.
Yes.
It not only brought you the respect of the people that you were working with, and you talked about this very first club that you took over, it also gave you the ability to actually teach them how to position yourself on the field, how to throw the ball, like where to look, where to pass, like how to defend. You mentioned you were a defensive leader. So all of that would not have been possible if you hadn't learned that craft of playing water polo yourself. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And I knew already how an Olympic was, because it's totally different to any other competitions. And when I got the position, I have been already on 3 Olympics. On the other 2, I had different roles. That was very important, but also what was very important, that I had a clear view on why I'm so happy you raised this thing, because I just developed the presentation this year, and I presented already several times, that skills development and team development can go hands in hands.
Yeah.
It doesn't and must not be separate. Like as you mentioned in another article, that in a 2-3 days team building exercise, you wouldn't change anything. You wouldn't build a team. Actually, it enlarges the role of the cliques, because they drink in cliques on the team building weekends. So it actually doesn't help to create the team, even if when you feel that with those games and workshops you will increase the team identity. It's rather the contrary to be truth. So actually, why I am happy to you raise that, because my method, because you offered me to talk about hunting territory about
Absolutely.
as well, that I don't use teaching as such. I introduce the leader or team leader who hires me, like the client, into the hunting territory, but I do that like walking him through or her through his or her own team problems from the hunting territory point of view in the hunting territory framework. And then we plan the whole hunting territory process and run the workshops together with the leader. So he or she learns it in vivo by doing it, which is not a good business model, because after a while they don't need me because they learn it.
It's a good business model because they will refer you to other people, and you will not run out of business.
Yeah, but that was my approach, or our approach in the psychiatric clinic as well. You know, social psychiatry was born out of psychoanalysis and behaviorism. And the psychoanalysis goes forever. And social psychiatry discovered that if you change the behavioral system or communication system of a family, after a while the family will work differently and would be able to accommodate or embrace the former patient. And there wouldn't be major problems. Sometimes he or she might come back to the hospital for a short treatment, but after he or she can live as any other person because the environment embraced him or her. And that's what I am doing with. So I knew that this approach that you'll teach or support people to learn to lead on their own, that's the mission. For me, this is a mission.
No, that's a very important thing. Now, I want to build up on this because the next thing I wrote down was you wanted to create a culture of mutual appreciation, love, and laughter. But the team that you were given, and we're not talking about the Australian ladies team, it was the very first team, I think, that you then took over in Hungary. They didn't have this culture. And I'm quoting you, you said you had to sweep out that culture. Now, every organization that I know, they want to go through some kind of cultural change. And there are a lot of different theories out there how culture can be changed. I've never heard anyone say, we sweep out the old culture. And that's what I want to deep dive with you in. What do you mean by that? How did you do that? How did you approach this as a new coach in that case? And how did you ultimately create that culture of mutual appreciation, love, and laughter?
Actually, the tools I use is from the very first day clarity. That I have to have the team to have the same goals and objectives. They understood the process we will be going through, the rules of communication, the scenarios around we operate. And I really done, actually the best way I was able to do it, it was in Australia. The problem was exactly the same, a dysfunctional team with talented players, a very bad leadership culture, around them, which created actually the conflicts. So when I talk about sweeping it out, that I started to behave differently. And actually I portrayed the vision straight away on the very first meeting when I selected the team, and we had the first team meeting. I had already a presentation prepared with the style of the game, with videos. I drew several biomechanical details I wanted to change in their skills. And I had the program for that year already. So they were delighted. They sometimes they learn 2 weeks before that they were going to a 1-month European trip. So they were completely tired of the, and also a lot of micropolitics. So once they felt that it will be different, they were already very open. But actually, this is the formation stage. It's not exactly the Tuckman model I used, but the formation word I use. But I also use it, that's an imprinting phase. That if you introduce things very transparently and you practice it every day, then it will imprint into the team's behavior, into their brains, because during the formation stage, people's minds are open. And why I use the imprinting word, because I stole it from the science of animals' behavior. When they have a part of the brain open for a window of time, and if they don't have the right stimuli during that time, they won't learn important things. For example, the cat eyes need a certain period when it receives the change of light frequency. If you put her into the room where there is no change of frequency, she will be blind in her whole life because the window closes. And I am convinced that it's similar with the teams, that there is an open window when you take a new team, and if you use it well, it will imprint a lot of things. So when the inside fight starts, which is in the Tuckman model as well, there is a lot of reference which keeps the internal competition between limits. Mm-hmm. So even during that time, the team can already perform. And I think it's crucial, because if you think again about football coaches, they don't have the luxury of going through the forming, storming, norming, performing stage, because when naturally the team would arrive to the performing stage, they would be already fired, because the competition starts almost in a month. And if you don't perform, you're sacked. It's not a patient environment. High-performance teams are not. And the same thing happens in important projects. You have to perform straight away. You don't have the luxury of waiting for natural team processes.
Mm-hmm. Now, clarity. I get that one. Super important. You started to behave differently. And I've seen that, right? When a leader or anyone on the team actually starts acting differently, it suddenly creates some kind of shift in the team dynamics. One thing that I want to dive in a bit deeper, and then I want to move, we've already moved basically to talking about the implications on business. But you mentioned that there is a period of time when there is this openness, when you take over a team, where you can imprint, to use your word, new behaviors into that team. What about people that have been working with that same team for many years, or CEOs that have been leading an organization for many years, and they want to now make that change in behavior, which ultimately is a change in culture, because they know that the organization needs to evolve, needs to change in order to stay competitive. Do you even see a chance for them, or do you always think it requires someone new to come in to create that window of opportunity?
No, I don't think that you have to fire someone to change things. Again, the key word is openness. If a leader is open to understand, looking into the window and have an insight, and that's why I introduced that 1.5 hour or 90 minutes introduction to the leader, because then he or she would understand that he or she is not threatened. Because what I felt earlier when we had the diagnostic workshops, that they withdrew and just observed how their team members were behaving. And when I asked them, why don't you participate? No, I just want to see how they behave. And that I learned later that was the recipe for the failure. Because they should have been the leaders of those workshops together with me. And then when I meet a leader, I tell them that this is what you have to do. We have to sit down, analyze your own situation, your team situation in an intimate environment where you don't feel threatened. Mm-hmm. And with the framework of the hunting territory, and because probably of my proof as a player and a coach, they believe me more than they would to a coach or someone. And if I succeed in convincing them, then we have a good fly. If they don't, they fire me during the first conversation, or they feel that, no, I am not the right person. They need someone who changes things like that. And there are people who promise it. So I am out. Yeah. What I am saying always that I can help people who really want to perform, not selling themselves with clever marketing or micropolitics and so on. And it's difficult because if you are honest, the business world is working around those principles. If you have a good a politician, very often you will succeed. You know how to answer on interviews. You know how to write a smart CV. You know how to please the key people, how to discover who are the key people in a company, and then make yourself loved by them. And they succeed for 2-4 years, then they take the money and go. So I can't help those guys.
No, they're not your target audience. Let's put it this way. So now let's make this move. And to some extent, we've already done this. We talked about your experience as a player. We talked about your experience as a coach. And I think it was during your time as a water polo coach that you codified, and correct me if I'm wrong, right? Codified this hunting territory method. First question I have is, why did you give it this name?
Yeah.
Why did you pick this name? And then we dive into it.
Yeah. I wrote about these things already in 85. I published a book called Here is the Red, Where is the Red? This is the game what in marketplaces they play with the red card and the very little red thing and a black thing with three cups.
Yeah.
So that was the title of my book, because it was a picture about the socialism what I lived in. So I just used the sport as an analogy. But in this book, I already had a title, and it was about the role of the money and that it's not just about the money. And I wrote down a lot of things about group dynamics without naming it hunting territory. And then I went to France and started to write that book in French, actually. And I met Arsene Wenger, you know well.
Oh, yes.
Because
Wow.
in 93, we were the two best teams of the Côte d'Azur. So at Christmas time, we were invited to the television station. They celebrated us. And I already had about 20, 30 pages written in French. And I told him that I have this theory and I am interested what he would think about it. He was a very smart coach. He still is. And I knew that he would be a good intellectual partner of testing this whole thing. And when we started to talk, I think that was first time I used the territory of chasse, hunting territory in French. And he jumped on it straight away. And we had a series of conversation during several weeks. And I realized that, yes, it applies to not just about polo, not just in a hospital environment, but also in in football. So that's where I first used the hunting territory, because it's very important on a football pitch, that players have a certain territorial need where they can freely enact what they want to do, fulfill their ambitions, and in the same time, it's impossible to create isolated territories in football. Necessarily, there will be overlaps. And the overlaps are crucial because this is the territory where collaboration and conflicts happen in the same time. So it's a very interesting question in football. If you have a great striker and you hire a new one for different reasons, you buy the conflicts in the same time, because their hunting territories will overlap big time. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't hire another good player, but you have to know that there will be a conflict and you will have to deal with that conflict. You have to even design how you would deal with it. The slogan of the hunting territory method is predict, detect, resolve. And it means that within this framework, you can actually predict all the challenges in any places. If there is a merge, or there is a restructuring, or you want a transformation within a team, you can analyze cautiously the situation, and like in chess, you can actually plan the steps. And I am saying it because I tried it and support business people to very high positions by doing this. So I have the experience that, yes, it is working. I've done it for myself, but it was more difficult because it was myself. So my self-justification was working as well, or self-interest. But if you help someone, you can actually switch it off, and you can help a lot more. As you mentioned again, that it's easier if you have someone like a mentor or whichever is the position who supports you, and in an intimate situation you can open your heart, because the leader role is the most lonely position on earth, because everyone is waiting performance and everyone is wanting to take your position. So it's really a lonely position in any level. And it is in coaching. I have a photo just some minutes before the Olympic final, and I am standing alone and on the bench, at the bench. So, and this symbolizes the situation as well. If you win, you are a hero. If you lose, you are a willow.
Yeah, no, I know that. I've been there. Now, you mentioned something when it's impossible to create isolated territories, be it water polo, be it football, be it business.
Yes.
Right? When I look at my small company of around 10 people, we don't have isolated territories.
Yes.
And we don't want to have isolated territories. Every organization is now looking at how can we break down the silos.
Yes.
And breaking down silos means you have overlapping territories. And another thing that you mentioned is when you have overlapping territories, that is the area where you have collaboration and conflict.
Or potential conflicts, yes.
Or potential. And this is something that I wanted to explore with you. Because if I look at human dynamics and relationships, right? Wherever you have a relationship, I've never seen a relationship without any type of conflict, right? If I look at my relationship with my parents, if I look at my relationship with my wife, if I look at my relationship with my sister, with my kids, there's always some kind of conflict because it's very natural that different people view the world differently. And it's their right to do so, right? We all have different eyes. Now, how do we go and deal with that conflict in order to strengthen the collaboration piece? How do you deal with that systematically? You mentioned predict, detect, resolve. How does it work?
Now, you always tap the essence of the things, and I love talking with you. I am afraid we run out of time, not from my time, but from your time, perhaps. That's why it's so important to discover, actually, the territorial overlaps. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned parent-kid relationship. When you are a little kid, you are on the territory of your parents. But as you grow, you want to get out of it. You need more freedom, because hunting territory means that every person needs a certain freedom in action and in decision making. And it changes. So as you, in a dictatorial or authoritarian workplace, you practically are not provided just with a very narrow territory, which is your task and roles. You have to deliver by yourself. Everything else is regulated, and actually it paralyzes any environment. And if you want a creative team, you mustn't do it. So it's. I just had a conversation with a psychologist, a very good psychologist. And he told me that, you can be enabling or empowering, but when it's about a game, the players need to do what you're saying. And I told him, no, you're completely false. The players have to play their game, because just think about a football game when there are 60,000 people screaming, and the field itself is big. No way that the players can listen what you're saying to them, and the game is so fast that you just can't tell them what to do. And then they would say, yes, but there is a strict tactics. There is not such thing than strict tactics. There is a framework of motions, movements, tactical patterns the team has to learn. But this is like in jazz, the basic tune. Mm. You must improvise. The rule is that only one player can improvise at the same time, because if everyone starts to improvise, that's a cacophony. But
It's a good one. Sorry. Go ahead.
But you need a tune, and you have to teach the tune. But you play against an opposition team you cannot completely foresee. Obviously, the predict is working because you analyze the opposition well. But still, in a game, anything can happen. That's the beauty of football and any other games. And actually, in business, it's the same thing. The goalposts are always changing, particularly if you take our time now. So you really have to be flexible and creative in order to survive. And what was your question? Because, yeah, I was talking about whether the teams is following your orders.
Yeah.
No, my philosophy is that you have to prepare the team to be self-efficient. Otherwise, you're not winning. You can obviously influence the game with changing players or giving a different instruction time to time. But you already have to speak the same language in details, that they would understand anything from just the gestures of yours and also each other from gestures. And when I took the Australian team, I knew that I had 2 years to make it happen, but I also knew, and that's the predict, which wasn't an art, that we would play 7 games in 8 days, and they are girls, so I wouldn't be able to enter the change room, and I wouldn't be able to enter into their rooms to have a conversation. So my access to the girls will be very limited. And I knew that, so I made everything in order to create a team which is really empowered, but not independent from me, but empowered to act in a team situation. And it sounds a paradox, but it is not. So that's why I like the word you used, enabling. Because empowerment works only if it goes through enabling, and it's still not the empowerment what several psychologists use in sport, that they organize meeting without the coach, saying that the coach, front of the coach, the players wouldn't talk. I taught it in my presentations in coaching courses that that's the biggest mistake you can do as a coach. No, the psychologists have to facilitate a conversation and teach you how to be appreciative of the player's opinion, so create an open discussion, but not exclude you. The empowerment doesn't mean that.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And I think, so you brought up this topic where someone needs to be excluded so that others can speak freely. Now, you can teach that someone to be more appreciative, as you mentioned. You can also ask the others to be more courageous.
Yes.
Because what I always say, I think it's false to only put it into the leader's job to create an environment of psychological safety.
I agree with you.
The others also have to contribute to that. Because if we just look around the world, and my parents were both part of the people that contributed to the revolution that happened in Iran in the late 1970s, nobody felt safe, but they were courageous to speak up. And we see the same happening right now in many places around the world. So we need to create an environment of safety so that more people feel courageous. But those who want to make a change, the ones on the team, they also need to be courageous to contribute to that change.
What you can do for it, sorry I interrupt you.
Go ahead.
That you as a leader wouldn't punish the players who are courageous enough.
That's the appreciation.
And that's the key thing. But this is what I teach to leaders, that you have to learn to listen and appreciate, because otherwise the creativity is killed. So because creativity is questioning things, no? Coming up with new ideas. And there are leaders who take it as an offense if someone has a different view, but like that they prevent themselves to have creative people around them.
Yeah, No, creativity is all about questioning whatever is the status quo and coming up with a different solution. Now, as a final question, and this will still fit in our time box, you mentioned that parent-child relationship, right? At some point, the child wants to have their own territory. Now, thinking about an organization, a CEO could look at their organization, no matter how big or how small it is, as the whole organization being the CEO's hunting territory.
That's right. That very often happens.
Exactly. But that obviously doesn't work, because you also mentioned that the people that have their individual yet overlapping territories need to have the freedom in decision making.
Yes.
Now, how do you help those CEOs that look at the whole organization being their hunting territory to create this awareness to reduce or make their own territory smaller and basically become an enabler of other people taking autonomous decisions in their own territories?
I have a tool. I have a fantastic team, including a graphic artist and a filmmaker, and we create movies out of football games where I'm focusing exactly on the critical topics. So these little clips are included into my presentations, which are catalysts for an open discussion, because it's not about the people who participate from the business world, but it's about football who everyone understands and adores. And I cautiously choose the little clips, and they are very well focused on things I want to pass through. And that helps. That opens somehow even these autocratic leaders, because it is in their heart and it is not an offense on them. Mm. And they can relate to it. And actually, and it has an impact on the workshop, which everyone, there are sometimes encouraging, very motivating footages, sometimes funny. And it adds something to the workshop series they can always refer to later. And I think it's very important to have those videos.
Yeah, those videos actually act as eye openers for them. Probably,
yes,
right?
Yeah, it's like really like a catalyst, as the whole hunting territory wants to be a catalyst. I don't want to tell them what to do. I want to help them to think more openly, to listen and appreciate each other. I think these are the most important things, and to teach them how to discover the territorial overlaps, how to deal with them, the details of the territorial overlaps, because this is crucial. People always tell that they want to collaborate, but they don't talk about on what, on the little details. And this is what we have going through, all the little details, so they can decide between themselves what to collaborate on and what not to, because they can still preserve their freedom in decision-making and acting. But in other things which are on the overlap, discovered by themselves, they realize that no, they need to have scenarios how to they deal with all those things, and the decision making, the dealing with resources, technologies, all sorts of things are on the territorial overlaps.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, once you identify those things and look at them and decide collectively how you're going to deal with those things, then it becomes so much easier.
And everyone is accountable.
Everyone is accountable, and everyone has what you mentioned earlier, clarity.
Yes.
Right? Everyone has clarity. So one of the most important things I took away from this conversation with you, a lot, but one of the things was we also need to make it safe for the leader.
Yes.
In any kind of change. You mentioned
Crucial.
this when you talked about the first workshops that you run with them, and that you, in the past, would run the workshop yourself. At least that's how I understood it. But now you move to a scenario where you include the leader, and the leader is actually leading the workshop, which makes them feel safe and probably more embracing of the new thing. And then that changes their behavior, and that results in the others changing themselves. So, Istvan, I want to thank you. This was very, very eye-opening for me. I took away a lot of insights. I made a ton of notes. They're all here. So when I go back and watch the video again and highlight the key messages for our video editor, there will be a ton of stuff out there. And I hope this was not our last conversation, because I think there's so much more to learn. But before we part, where can people learn more about the Hunting Territory method, and how can they connect with you?
We've got a website, huntingterritory.com.
We will link it.
Yeah, and I am more than happy to talk to people, because really I feel this is my mission, to help people to have better teams. And because as soon as you create a good team, you're happy, not just the team members, you as a leader, because you know that you're not alone. So, and I worked in Australia, I worked in the UK, so I have experience I was coach in France, coach in Australia, worked in Australia as well, so I have a cross-cultural experience as well.
Yeah, which definitely helps when we think about the big organizations out there. So, Istvan, thank you so much for making yourself available today. We will link your website to this video so that people can reach out, can find you easily. And I hope you and I will continue this conversation in one form or the other. Thank you so much.
I have to thank you, because I enjoyed it so much, because you're so open that it really motivates me to talk about things, because you're listening. And I already knew that we were on the same page in a lot of things. So thank you so much. And I hope that we will continue this.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this conversation.